The Florida Panthers have shocked the entire hockey world over the past few weeks as they went from a team who barely made the playoffs to now competing in a conference finals series. Yes, the Florida Panthers are set to take on the Carolina Hurricane in a best-of-7 series, and the winner is heading to the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, if the Florida Panthers were to beat the Carolina Hurricane, this would be the first time that the Panthers have made the finals since '96. Yes, it's been nearly 30 years since the Florida Panthers have reached the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, in their entire history, which, to be fair, hasn't been that long, in the entire Florida Panthers history, the team has never won a Stanley Cup before. And after having the most wins in franchise history just the year before, this might be their year. The year that the Florida Panthers make it all the way. Now, how did this scrappy Florida team end up in the conference finals? And to understand that, we have to take a look at last season, where the Florida Panthers had a franchise record 122 points with 58 wins. The best season in franchise history by far, at least in the regular season. But things weren't all sunshine and rainbows for the Panthers. Although they did have a lot of wins last year, things weren't very pretty, especially on the head coaching side of things. You see, Quenneville was going into his third year as head coach for the Panthers after his long stint with the Chicago Blackhawks. And speaking of his long stint with the Chicago Blackhawks, one of his former employees, one of his former staff members, had some sexual assault allegations against them, and it seems like Quenneville didn't handle that very well at the time. So Quenneville, when these SA allegations came up again, Quenneville decided to resign from the Panthers as head coach, even though the Panthers were 7-0 and looking very good last season. Anyway, Brunette took over as head coach, led them, got 51 wins. He was a fantastic substitute, a fantastic interim coach, one of the best in NHL history. I'm just going to say it. Anyway, even though the Panthers had some ugly coaching issues, they still had some fantastic leaders in the locker room. I mean, for example, their leading points getter last season was two-time All-Star and former third overall pick, Jonathan Huberdeau, who was fantastic last year, breakout year. I'm talking 115 points to be exact, with 22 strength goals, 5 power play goals, 7 game winning goals. Jonathan Huberdeau was the man, the scorer for the team last year after they won 58 games. He was amazing. What happened to him the year after that? Well, in the offseason, blockbuster trade in July, Jonathan Huberdeau somehow gets traded to the Calgary Flames for Matthew Tkachuk, basically straight up. I mean, Mackenzie Weegar went with Huberdeau, but it was basically just Tkachuk for Huberdeau. Anyway, why did they trade their leading points getter? Well, maybe it was because the Florida Panthers had underperformed in the playoffs for a third straight year. Yes, I know I hyped up how phenomenal their regular season was last year, but the reason that they got rid of their superstar was because this team did not make it out of the second round. They lost in the second round, and this wasn't the first time that the Panthers had underperformed. I mean, the year before, in 2021, this team did win 37 games, so they weren't, the best team on the block, and they lost in the first round. Now, and the year before that, they lost in the qualifying round. 2020, it was a weird year. Whatever, we'll cut them some slack. Anyway, they lose in the qualifying round in 2020, they lose in the first round in 2021, and then they lose in the second round in 2022. Yes, there's progression, but it's not really getting to where the team wanted to be, which is why they traded for Matthew Tkachuk, and that might have been the ballsiest and best move this franchise has ever made. Now, Matthew Tkachuk took Huberdeau's place as the points getter for the team, and he's done fantastic, especially in the playoffs. Matthew Tkachuk is having himself a great season. Should clarify and say great postseason, because in the regular season, he was nice, but he did only play in 40 games. He didn't play in all of them. He did miss like half this year. Besides the point, because he's here now. And he was here when the Panthers took on one of the best regular season teams in NHL history in the Boston Bruins. I mean, the Boston Bruins were like the 2016 Warriors when the Warriors won like 70 plus games. That was this kind of Bruins team. And yet, the Panthers took care of business in the first round, beating them in 7 games, and that wasn't thanks to Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk had how many goals? 1 point. He had 1 point in the first game, I want to say. In the second game, he had 2, and, you know, so on and so forth. I mean, in games 5, he had 2. Game 6, he had 3. Game 7, he had 1. So, he was a massive contributor throughout the series. He didn't score in maybe only 2 games the entire time versus the Bruins, but Matthew Tkachuk did his job when he was called upon. And he's continued to do his job. I mean, look at what he did against the Maple Leafs in Game 1 of the second round. He scored 3 points for the Panthers in Game 1 to help give them the win early on and take a strong, commanding series lead. And from there, he didn't let up. But he isn't the only player. I know I've been talking mainly about him, but there have been more players who have contributed to this crazy postseason success. I mean, shout out to the goalie, 34-year-old Sergei Bobrovsky. And although he might have had a rough go of things versus the Boston Bruins were the best team in hockey, so cut him some slack there. In fact, in the 5 games that he played against the Boston Bruins, he did end up being the winning goalie in 3 of those games. Now, most of them were rough, yes, but he stepped up in the second round versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he started in all 5 games and only allowed, I want to say, 2 goals every single game. It was fantastic play from the goalkeeper. And in fact, in the closeout game versus the Maple Leafs, he got 50 saves, which is a crazy and absurd amount of saves to have in a single game. So shout out to Bobrovsky, fantastic goalie, Matthew Tkachuk, crazy scorer, and there are plenty of other guys who I haven't even touched bases on yet. This team is crazy, and let's take a little pause and give some love to their coach. I mean, this coach came in after Quintonville got fired and Burnett had to take over last year. So this was Coach Paul Maurice's first year with the Florida Panthers, and he was coming off of a pretty good 9-year stint with the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, Paul Maurice has been around the game for way longer than I've been born. In fact, he's been coaching since 95. So Paul Maurice has been around the game. He's seen it all, and I'm pretty sure if you were to ask anybody at the beginning of the season who thought the Florida Panthers would be here, Paul Maurice is one of the few guys that would answer with confidence and say he expected the Florida Panthers to be here. Because he's seen it all. Anyway, this was his first year with the Panthers, and he's done a fantastic job coaching them. He had to deal with some injuries in the regular season, leading to not the best record, but that didn't matter because everyone was healthy and here to play in the postseason. And oh my god, this team is 4 wins away from making a Stanley Cup Finals appearance. Crazy. If they make it that far, I mean, depending on if they play the Knights or the Stars, they might win a Stanley Cup, which is crazy. If they win it, come back to this video and you have to subscribe. Alright, that's it. That's all hockey talk I have for today. You know, I don't cover it that much, but I do like the sport. So, if you like the content, make sure to subscribe. Catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.